In the next scene, we see Kang Ho fascinated by his prosecutor's badge, which he secretly took from his mother. When she isn't around, the protagonist spends hours looking at the object. When Young Soon mentions that Kang Ho will now manage the farm, the man expresses his desire to be a prosecutor again. However, his mother opens up and asks him never to pursue that idea again. Meanwhile, our dear Sam-sik has found a way to get part of the money he owes those men. Sam-sik found an expensive handbag belonging to his mother, a gift from Young Soon when she discovered she wouldn't have much longer to live, and decided to sell it. This granted him a bit more breathing room to manage the remainder of his debt, but only for a few more days. Returning to our protagonist's mother, later she goes to meet her neighbors and asks for help finding a wife for her son, which brings much joy and excitement to everyone. In the following days, the search for a perfect bride begins, one willing to help the small man become the Kang Ho of the past, all while assisting in the farm's management. However, the meetings are truly disastrous, and the protagonist makes it increasingly evident to Young Soon that he only has eyes for Mi-ju. Speaking of Mi-ju, taking advantage of being in the city center, Kang Ho visits her at her nail salon and even ends up defending her from a man who was bothering his beloved. In the middle of this commotion, the two almost get hit by a motorcycle, and when they fall to the ground, some of Kang Ho's memories return, such as the day he was supposed to take his first college entrance exam but missed it because he went to the hospital with Mi-ju, who had an accident. Thus, as soon as he regains consciousness, Kang Ho kisses Mi-ju and repeats that he will be able to take the exam next year, just as he said a few years ago. Young Soon also realizes that some memories of her son are returning, so she tries to hasten finding a bride for the protagonist because she believes that if he marries and has children, he won't have the courage to risk himself again seeking revenge for his father. In the coming days, Young Soon gets lucky because Andrea, who helps her on the farm, heard rumors that she was looking for a daughter-in-law, so he asks if Young Soon would like to meet his excursion companion, which makes Young Soon very happy. In the next scene, we see a meeting between Young Soon and the woman, and immediately, the feeling of happiness is mutual, leading the candidate to ask to meet Kang Ho, thus setting another meeting. Meanwhile, our protagonist was deep in thought at the farm, and as rumors spread quickly, Sam-sik soon shows up with beers. He is there to see if he can convince Kang Ho to give him the jewelry Young Soon bought for the protagonist's future wife, so Sam-sik would have another good sum to pay those he owes. And since Kang Ho trusts his friend, Sam-sik quickly achieves his goal. But the man's bad reputation is known throughout the town, so not long after, both boys' parents are called to the police station, as the police suspected that Sam-sik stole the jewelry from Kang Ho, despite the protagonist saying he gave it to him. In the next scene, we shift to something else happening elsewhere. Unfortunately, the woman who had given birth to a child out of wedlock with Tae-soo was found lifeless, floating in the sea. And even though the protagonist had arranged for her to live worry-free in another country, the former prosecutor wouldn't leave anything that could ruin his reputation in Kang Ho's hands, so he sent men to deal with the mother and child right after the boat left the port. Naturally, when Woo Byok found out about this, he freaked out because once again, the former prosecutor betrayed the deal they had made. But now, to fix things between them, the future president proposes that the two join forces against Kang Ho, meaning the protagonist must be eliminated for the deal to be sealed. Returning to Young Soon, when she is home with Kang Ho, she scolds him for giving the jewelry to Sam-sik, although she has already gotten it back. And once again, when the protagonist says he wants to be a prosecutor again, adding now that it's so Mi-ju would be proud of that side of him, Young Soon makes a decision to ask the woman to stay away from her son. Naturally, the way Young Soon spoke hurts our beloved Mi-ju once more. However, as Young Soon revealed her illness and that she doesn't have much time left, the woman couldn't bring herself to tell her what we're about to discover. Tired of hiding this secret, later that tearful night, Mi-ju opens her heart to her mother and reveals the truth, which is that Yi-jin and Seo-jin are Kang Ho's children. Now opening a parenthesis, shortly after Mi-ju and the protagonist ended their relationship, she discovered her pregnancy. But since Kang Ho had decided to keep her out of his life, Mi-ju didn't have the courage to share the news with him. So, with the support of her friend, the one who later betrayed her, she held strong until the end. Her anger towards Kang Ho grew even more when, one day, with the twins already born, she saw from a distance as the protagonist got into the car of the ex-prosecutor's daughter. At that moment, a thought crossed Mi-ju's mind, one many women have had, wondering what her life had become while he enjoyed his. That's when she decided to take the babies to her mother to care for them. Now, back to the present, Mi-ju's mother is shocked by the revealed secret, but asks her daughter never to tell Young-soon the truth, because, according to her, caring for a sick person is very difficult. Regardless of her mother's words, Mi-ju was determined the next day to lay all the cards on the table, so she dressed the twins and went happily to the farm. However, there, she and Young-soon's prospective daughter-in-law had to put their issues aside to help Kang Ho because Young-soon suddenly fainted. During the time the four of them spent at the hospital, Young-soon's prospective daughter-in-law noticed that Mi-ju and Kang Ho had feelings for each other, so she decided to step back from her relationship with the protagonist. Meanwhile, Kang Ho began to face a reality check upon discovering that his mother was very ill. He had some idea that Young-soon had a problem, but not that it was this severe. And when the lady woke up, once again she tried to return to her old life, including her typical rudeness towards our beloved Mi-ju, blaming her for the woman withdrawing from marrying her son. Meanwhile, Sam-sik was facing the woman to whom he had sold his mother's expensive handbag. Because the handbag's bottom was unstitched, the woman demanded her money back and returned the bag. Fortunately, at that moment, Sam-sik had the money his parents had sent to pay his debt to those people in his account, so he just transferred the amount, but the other problem would still persist. Well, the focus currently isn't on that, because soon Sam-sik realized there was a USB drive and a birth certificate hidden within that seam of the bag, something that was certainly Kang Ho's doing. He must have tucked it away in the accessory before giving it to his mother, and then Young-soon passed it on to her neighbor unknowingly. As such, Sam-sik quickly sought out Kang Ho, and after several attempts, the two managed to crack the password and listen to what was on the USB drive. It contained audio of a conversation between Kang Ho, Woo Byok, and Tae-soo, essentially implicating Woo Byok and Tae-soo in what happened to that mother and baby. But since the protagonist doesn't remember everything, he cautiously asks Sam-sik to investigate it for him. Thus, the next day, taking advantage of a ride from the duo working for Woo Byok, Sam-sik goes to meet Ha-young at a cafe. This act had the duo trailing him, as they wanted to know why on earth Sam-sik would be interested in something with Tae-soo's family. Initially, Ha-young agreed to give Sam-sik money in exchange for the content he possessed, so they arranged to meet later at the same place. However, soon after Sam-sik left the cafe, he was captured by Tae-soo's men who had grown suspicious of Sam-sik's conversation with Ha-young. Now in a seemingly abandoned location, Sam-sik suffered numerous injuries from Tae-soo's people who did everything they could to extract information from him, and the man narrowly avoided the end, thanks to the intervention of Woo Byok's duo who saved him. Unfortunately, in this conflict, Tae-soo's men took all the materials Sam-sik had found in that bag, and before the duo could explain who they really were, Sam-sik fled. Ha-young waited for Sam-sik the entire time at the agreed location, but it was her father who showed up. And as she stood her ground this time, Tae-soo once again made it clear that Ha-young was just as involved in Kang Ho's accident as he was. The following day, as a provocation, Woo Byok sent Ha-young photos showing that Kang Ho was recovering very well, leaving the woman, who was already frazzled, even more distressed. With mixed fear and guilt, she decided to run away from her marriage, leaving her father furious. Ha-young goes to the village, but she doesn't have the courage to speak with Kang Ho, and as soon as she returns home, her father commits her to a psychiatric hospital as a consequence for causing a scandal that could affect the elections. As for the fate of our dear Kang Ho, Tae-soo's men, well, I believe it was them, set the pig farm on fire to send a warning to the family. In the panic of seeing everything falling apart once again, Young Soon was delayed in getting out of the fire, and since the protagonist was meant to be the last to leave, he ended up passing out before he could escape. At that moment, the memories of our beloved protagonist began to return. Soon, Sam-sik decided to step in to help his friend because he was the one who spotted two men wearing caps doing something suspicious, and he was also the one who warned Young Soon about the fire. But in the end, we see the duo emerging from the flames, and the one actually carrying someone on his back is Kang-ho, who fortunately woke up and found Sam-sik unconscious, which made me chuckle amid the desperation. Eventually, the two men are taken to the hospital and are kept under observation. As Sam-sik is the first to wake up, the police question him about what he saw, hoping it might contribute to the investigation. However, Young Soon prevents Sam-sik from sharing the information about having seen two men at the farm, and now both he and Mi-ju start to suspect something is going on. Later, when Sam-sik and the woman are alone, Mi-ju discovers what her friend was doing for Kang-ho, including the recording involving the ex-prosecutor and everything else. Thinking of getting more answers, the two agree to continue investigating what the protagonist and Young Soon are worried about, actually more the lady than Kang-ho, as he doesn't even remember. Before proceeding with their plans, Mi-ju tries to persuade Young Soon to file a police report against the ex-prosecutor for what happened to her farm, but since the lady shows a desire to let everything go to avoid drawing Tae-soo's attention, at this moment, our dear Mi-ju reveals the relationship she and Kang-ho had, including the fact that he doesn't even know about his children. This conversation was beneficial for both of them, as it allowed Mi-ju to finally discover the reason why the protagonist left her, which was to seek revenge for his father. Later, Kang-ho wakes up, but he can barely show that he's back to being himself because, soon after, a detective arrives to arrest him on suspicion of the death of the woman who was carrying Tae-soo's child, although the part about the child being the ex-prosecutors is something the police don't know yet. Thus, the protagonist is taken to the police station, and the only way he thinks he can avoid going behind bars at the moment is by pretending he still has no memory. In this way, Kang-ho is soon released. However, at home, when he's alone with his mother, she tells him to stop pretending and is moved to see that her boy is finally okay. Yet, alongside this happiness comes fear, because Kang-ho asks Young Soon to trust him, since now that he is back, he wants to complete his plan of revenge to finally leave the past behind. With this said, in the following days, Kang-ho asks his mother not to be alone, as he is out gathering evidence to incriminate Tae-soo and Woo Byok. Before reaching the city, Kang-ho takes a detour to see his children, now that he knows about them, after hearing Mi-ju tell his mother at the hospital. He also sought out the woman and gave her the chance to vent her anger at him for leaving her. However, once the anger subsides, Mi-ju asks the protagonist to be careful with these dangerous people, and the secret that he is back to normal will remain between her and Young Soon. For everyone else, it was said that Kang-ho returned to the hospital. In the next scene, we see the duo who work for Woo Byok shocked to discover that it was not Tae-soo who ordered the farm to be set on fire, but rather their boss. Switching to Mi-ju, as she watched the videos her little ones made on their phone, she discovered that, by luck, they recorded Tae-soo's daughter putting some substance in Kang-ho's water on the day of the accident, which, though tragic, is evidence that could help the protagonist. Considering that Mi-ju cannot sit still while everything is in chaos, the next day she dragged Sam-sik to Ha-young's house and even tried to get inside to see if she could coax something out from Kang-ho's ex-fiancé. Unfortunately, as we know, Ha-young is hospitalized in a psychiatric facility. By a stroke of luck, or misfortune, it was not the first time Mi-ju crossed paths with Ha-young. Once Ha-young was a troublesome client of our dear Mi-ju and mentioned a psychiatric hospital where she could have Mi-ju committed anytime she wanted, due to her family's considerable power. This way, Mi-ju knew exactly where to go. Infiltrating the hospital, it didn't take long for the duo to discover Ha-young's room. After the man used his skill to unlock the door, Dr. Mi-ju and patient Sam-sik went into action. What did you think of these episodes? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like and share it to help me out. Until next time.